Hi everyone, welcome to episode 1 of the Kids Cancer Therapy Toolbox podcast by the Children's Cancer Therapy Development Institute. I'm Anna and I'm here with Georgia and Ahana.
Throughout our podcast, we're aiming to spread awareness of childhood cancer and the power of science. We're here to make solutions and give back childhood. Our cancer expert is Dr. Charles Keller, the Scientific Director of the Children's Cancer Therapy Development Institute, or cc-TDI for short.
Today, we'll briefly be discussing cc-TDI's work, and then we'll interview Wills Levy, a high school student who's been involved with cc-TDI for several years.
cc-TDI is a nonprofit biotech lab founded in 2015 with the aim of making childhood cancer universally survivable. cc-TDI is working to send more targeted and less toxic drugs into clinical trials for childhood cancers with the most dire outcomes. The team consists of staff scientists, leadership, and collaborators from across the globe.
Key advancements over the past decade include translating 2 drugs into 3 national and international clinical trials, publishing 67 peer-reviewed scientific studies featuring quail assay technology in the Journal of Nature, opening a new cutting-edge lab in Hillsboro, Oregon, and establishing the Megan Bug Global Rhabdomyosarcoma Research Laboratory.
cc-TDI's priorities include focused research, a sustainable future, transformative collaborations and partnerships, and creating a multidisciplinary team and collaborative research environment. Their research focuses on soft tissue, liver, kidney, brain, bone, and non-brain nervous system cancers. Now let's turn it over to our interview with Wills Levy.
Wills, could you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your hobbies, interests, and goals?
Yeah, so hi everyone. My name's Wills Levy. I'm a rising junior at Seabury Hall High School in Maui. I enjoy playing soccer and have 2 younger sisters and a younger brother. Part of the reason my involvement in child cancer research comes from my experience losing my younger brother Andrew to AMKL leukemia when I was 5 years old. Since then, I had been part of the cc-TDI Junior Board for 5 years, and afterward spent a couple of weeks up in Portland doing an internship with cc-TDI, working on developing plasmids and in a lentivirus to target the ALK super enhancer for rhabdomyosarcoma. And then this past summer have been interning at Nurix, a biotech company in San Francisco, where I've been working on protein purifications. And so I've done a wide variety of work to raise awareness for childhood cancer, and obviously also have personal experience losing a family member to a form of childhood cancer. And so it's an area I'm deeply passionate about. And I'd like to say that over the past couple of years, I've gained quite a bit of experience in this field.
So, as you were telling us, your brother experienced acute megakaryoblast leukemia, a type of acute myeloid leukemia. Could you share about your brother's diagnosis and your family's journey?
Yeah, so I was quite young when he was diagnosed with cancer. I think something important to know, and a lot of people who have experiences with cancer, family members with cancer, know that when you first get cancer, you don't really know what it is, and you don't know much about it. All you kind of just know is you hear the word cancer. Obviously, there's a wide variety of different stuff that kind of like that the cancer patient experiences leading into the cancer diagnosis. So I definitely remember there was a lot of kind of confusion. I was young, but my younger brother was bouncing between hospitals and different doctors trying to figure out what was up. And there was all these false diagnoses and then treatments that didn't check out. And there was probably like a good 2 weeks of confusion. And my parents in different urgent cares and emergency rooms checking to see what was up. And then eventually when he got diagnosed with cancer at that age, I didn't really know what it meant. But when you hear the word cancer, there's obviously a lot of fear associated with it. And at the time, I didn't know much about the cancer. Obviously, it's a type of leukemia, so a blood cancer, which makes it pretty difficult to treat. And it's an extremely rare form of leukemia. There's a more common AML leukemia in children, which is fairly curable, especially when caught early. However, this acute megakaryoblast leukemia is much rarer, and there's only a few cases of it in the world. So it was definitely something that the folks at Stanford, Lucille Packard Children's Hospital in Stanford, where he was treated and we lived right down the street from, hadn't experienced before. And obviously you can try to treat it with chemotherapy. And so I saw that whole process. And at the time, I was just trying to learn because I was confused. I mean, when you're 5 years old, you don't know much about it. But it was just a lot of like, I would ask a lot of questions. I would say, like, there was definitely some popsicle stick diagrams and coloring with crayons to help explain what was going on. The doctors definitely helped me with like understand a little bit, but it was definitely confusing. And then the whole process of chemotherapy was obviously tough. He was put in a ward for people were immunosuppressed because the chemotherapy wipes out your immune system. Obviously, he lost his hair, and so I got a buzz cut along with my dad and him so that we would all look the same. But the whole treatment process definitely was a little bit of a blur. As you know, like most people don't remember everything from that age. But it was definitely a little scary to see my brother going through all of this. And I didn't know entirely what was going on, but I definitely made an effort to kind of learn more. And I would definitely say that kind of that curiosity then had kind of like snowballed into a little more interest in like research, and then eventually obviously getting involved with cancer research at a young age, like I have been for the past couple of years.
What do you remember the most vividly about that time? And how has your brother's diagnosis affected you and your perspective now?
Like I said, like definitely at that time there was just a lot of confusion around the diagnosis. I didn't know a lot. All I knew was my mom was away most nights, my dad would be away some nights, and my brother was away almost every night. And then it was scary because we didn't really get to interact with him because I was 5 years old, right? So I carried a ton of diseases and like just like even a common cold, right? You go to preschool every day and you get those different sicknesses, and so I wasn't allowed. Me or my younger sister Leah weren't allowed to actually visit Andrew in this immunosuppressed ward. So we would like go on phone calls and wave through the window on the ground floor of Lucille Packard Children's Hospital. And so there was definitely it was just a lot of confusion. Like, why can't I see him and hug him and hang out with him? And then obviously I kind of began to understand the severity of what was going on. And it was definitely a little scary. And that kind of whole experience, and then eventually he passed away. But it was definitely kind of gave me perspective young in life about like crazy stuff happens, bad things happen, especially when I was growing up in the Bay Area at first. I moved to Hawaii later during COVID, but like there's not a lot of adversity that people face. And so kind of seeing the realness of life was pretty scary for me, but also definitely gave me context. Like, you lose like a sports game, it's not the end of the world. You get a bad grade, not the end of the world. And so definitely gave me a sense of kind of purpose and value that was definitely like um, something I took with me moving forward. But it was a pretty awful experience, the whole thing. And obviously I learned things and it kind of inspired my life now, but it's not something I would ever want anyone my age to go through, or any family to go through at any age.
Yeah, so you mentioned how this experience led to your passion for research, and you were on the junior board at cc-TDI for several years. What is some of the work you and the rest of the board achieved?
Yeah, so obviously after I lost my brother to cancer, it was definitely like there was kind of a feeling like, oh, maybe this is I want to like help kids like my brother, right? And I was 5, so it took me quite a few years of kind of like feeling like that, and like I wonder if there's a way I can help. And my mom had a friend actually who was on the board of directors at cc-TDI, and was knew Charles, knew that there's this girl Callie who was trying to start like a junior board at cc-TDI, and she connected me with Charles and Callie, and I joined. I wanted to say was one of the first iterations of the junior board. It's kind of gone through a few different iterations where all like most of the members were there, and then kind of like get disconnected or drift away, and then there's like a new board with new people. But was pretty consistently on like those junior boards for like probably 5 year stretch. And it was really nice because it was like my first time that I thought I could like do something and make a difference in cancer research. And like after hearing about the work cc-TDI is doing, which with more context now, the fact that cc-TDI is like doesn't really have like a ton of like funding from like as like a on like a business side, and is more kind of operates off of donations and grants, the ability to raise money for cc-TDI was something that I think could like really made like a concrete difference in the field of cancer research. And honestly, the main goal of junior board is just to raise money and awareness for childhood cancer. And we did all sorts of different initiatives to try to do so. Obviously, I was in Hawaii when I joined or for the majority of the time I spent on the junior board. And so I wasn't in Portland to run local fundraisers. However, some of the things that I was able to do was I did one fundraiser where it was an exercise fundraiser. And so a lot of what I did is I created, it was like a Peloton fundraiser technically. And the work I did was a lot of like social media posting and coordination to try to outreach the cc-TDI community and like my community and the communities of all the different junior board members and other people involved with cc-TDI, and kind of encourage them to do this like exercise challenge where it was like 20 for 20, like exercise for 20 minutes, post a photo of yourself with the hashtag like cc-TDI 20 for 20, and then donate $20 to cancer research. And I think in the end, we ended up raising close to $4,000. And it was like it was a really great experience because I never like thought of raising that much money ever before. And obviously it all went to cc-TDI to fund cancer research. And it was really nice to kind of feel, I was in 7th grade at the time, to feel like I could like make a difference. The junior board did a bunch of other things as well. I think we did a t-shirt design contest where a bunch of kids from a bunch of schools, I had kids from like my school submitting designs to make a t-shirt, and then the whole junior board picked their favorite t-shirt and put it and like printed it with one of like those websites where you can print t-shirts, and then we sold them, and all that money also went to cc-TDI. So it was a really fun time on the junior board. I think I've kind of drifted away these past few years as the board has changed, but it's been something that I was able to do for quite a bit of time, and then eventually led to kind of my connection with cc-TDI to start a brief internship there, which is kind of butted into the next phase of my interest in helping kids with cancer.
Yeah, so you also had an internship with Nurix and cc-TDI. So could you tell us a bit about kind of what you did and then what you learned from that?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying most kids my age would never think to go into, or never think that they could even have the ability to go into cancer research at a young age. And I'll definitely say that my experience on the cc-TDI junior board was definitely a big factor leading into this kind of like helping me kind of get my foot in the water and get wet, you could say, with cancer research. And my involvement with cc-TDI then led me to kind of, I would track their like Instagram page, and as I was reaching like freshman year of high school and looking for things to do during the summer, to like kind of feel academic challenge, and obviously I kind of had an interest in science that had translated from my time with my brother when he had cancer. And I had noticed that cc-TDI was talking about how they had internship programs they could offer to high schoolers. And so I reached out to Charles, who I knew briefly and from my time on the junior board, and said, "Hey, I live in Hawaii, but I'm really interested in making a difference in cancer research and potentially learning a little bit about what actually goes on in the lab. Is there a chance I could do like a 2-week mini internship with cc-TDI and just learn like a little bit about what you're doing and hopefully help you out?" And him and the whole team at cc-TDI were super welcoming and open to me doing that, even though in reality with 2 weeks it's really hard to do like concrete work. But he found a project for me to do, helping them like blueprint lentivirus plasmid to help target the ALK super enhancer, which is a key transcription factor, which essentially amplifies DNA to help cancers grow and expand, you could say. And I helped design this plasmid that was like essentially like a virus. And what it does is it goes into cells and it infects the cells and tells the cells and like binds to the parts of the sequence, the DNA sequence that creates this like ALK super enhancer, it like can kind of read that sequence and wants to bind to that and like replaces it and codes for like a toxin to be made in its place. So all these cells that are coding for the ALK super enhancer are being instead like essentially coding for their own death through poison. And it was a really cool concept. I'd heard a little bit about it in biology. And one of the really cool things I think about something like this lentivirus and these plasmids is that rather than like chemotherapy, which is the most common treatment for cancers, like leukemia, which was obviously my brother's cancer, is that chemotherapy, it's non-specific, right? You send it and it attacks all the cells in your body. And it's almost like blindly just shooting at a field of soldiers and hoping that you're mostly killing soldiers that are your enemy. But in reality, you could be killing 50% soldiers that are your own. And so it's like, it's a real question of, can you kill the cancer before the chemotherapy kills you? And this like plasmid was super cool because it's specific and it targets only the cells that are coding for this ALK super enhancer, which obviously is a big part of the actual cancer growth. And kind of this whole experience was like over 2 weeks, wasn't a lot of time, but I just did a lot of reading. I tried to see as much as I could around the lab when they were doing they're helping cultivate cell cultures. I tried to like help them out there and just see a little bit of it. And it was always just a really good experience to like dip my toe in the water of cancer research. And then that eventually led to a much longer internship at Nurix here in San Francisco. And something that I think is important to know is that I spend the summers in California. And so I was able to go up to Portland just for 2 weeks. And my grandparents went up there and helped stay with me for 1 week. And then I had a auntie, as you call it in Hawaii, like a nanny who I spend a lot, who's like known me since I was a baby, spend another week up there in Portland. I spent the weekend with some friends, but it was really difficult for me to spend 2 weeks up in Portland because my family wasn't there and I was 15, so I couldn't drive. And Charles knew this, and obviously we worked to find something I could do for 2 weeks, but I definitely expressed that I wish I could have spent more time at the lab in cc-TDI and helped them more and made a difference. And cc-TDI has a collaborator on this project called KUDAC, which is this collaboration between a bunch of different cancer research organizations to help tackle a few different types of cancers and specific proteins. And one of these collaborators is actually based in San Francisco, and it's called Nurix. It's a decently sized biotech company that specializes in making protein degraders, which are essentially like drugs that target proteins that are crucial for cancers and doesn't like stop them from working by like say covering them, but rather degrades them, and so kind of gets them put in the cellular trash can of sorts through this cellular pathway, like the E3 ubiquitin ligase pathways. But it's a special type of drug because most drugs on the market are inhibitors, meaning they like block proteins from working without taking them like away. And it's also definitely another form of kind of a groundbreaking drug in the sense that it also can be very specific to cancers and get rid of proteins that are crucial for cellular pathways that help produce and help cancers grow and reproduce. However, what was really nice was because Nurix is based in San Francisco, I could spend the summer with my family in San Francisco. And I'd worked there for 7 weeks, and my internship actually just ended yesterday. But my work there encompassed protein purifications, which was the way that these protein degrader drugs work is you need to find molecules that bind to the protein. But first, you actually have to be able to produce the cancer proteins. So what I've been doing at Nurix this past 2 months almost is working through taking the bacteria that produce the proteins and stripping the proteins off of the bacteria. And then through a bunch of different steps, essentially just getting the proteins that the bacteria produce that are the cancer proteins and getting rid of everything else. And so Nurix has people that use these plasmids that I was talking about earlier to essentially get them into the bacteria, because plasmids are just rings of DNA. So they give the bacteria these rings of DNA, and then the bacteria, and these rings of DNA that they're giving the bacteria are coding for these cancerous proteins. So they're giving bacteria DNA to code for the cancer proteins. And then the DNA is expressing these cancer proteins, but cells express like hundreds and so many proteins. And so what I had to do at Nurix was we would take all these, it's like a protein salad. There's just like so many different varieties of proteins that are produced, and we have to get all the proteins out of the cell. And then there's steps where you can like filter the proteins so that you get only the proteins you want. And so I work through, it's like a 3-day workflow to get maybe like you get like 400 or like nanomoles of protein if it's a really good day. Some days I get like 50. And these are like, it's really infinitesimal amounts of protein. And with that protein, Nurix is able to screen compounds to see what binds to those proteins. And then the binders eventually undergo a series of tests and modifications to eventually, hopefully, become part of drugs that will bind to these cancerous proteins and then essentially just drag them into the cellular trash can. And the hope is, in doing this, it can eradicate cancers.
So, how did your experiences with research and advocacy through the cc-TDI board change your view of pediatric cancer or cancer in general?
I mean, something that I think, especially as a family member or anyone who's close to a patient, friend, parent, patient themselves, I think cancer seems like this obstacle that's like impassable, incurable. You say like, get back to me when you cure cancer, right? It's like, it seems like the only way you can really treat cancer or get remission is by getting lucky. So like you maybe like win through chemotherapy, you get lucky. Perhaps you do a bone marrow transplant, which is something I was fortunate to be able to give to my brother. But it's often something where it feels like cancer's kind of, it's like this looming threat of mortality where there's almost no way to prevent, like to cure it. It's not like a drug, right? You have the flu, you take Tamiflu and you're better. And so my experience working in cancer research really showed me there are things that are proven that can get rid of cancer and can, quote unquote, cure cancer. However, there's all these barriers to actually achieving these and finding these cures to cancer for the thousands of cancers that exist. And so it's kind of led me to the realization that if enough research and time and energy and obviously money gets put into finding cures for cancer, it's not something that's like impossible to be cured. There are pathways and there's logic that can lead to research that could kill certain types of cancer. But I've realized, especially during my time at Nurix and cc-TDI, that the big determinant of whether these cancers can be cured is time and money, because it takes upwards of probably 5 years to get through a clinical trial. And then there's all this time before the clinical trials, when you have the drug, it takes probably another 10 years, maybe more, maybe less, of research to even get to the point where you have a viable drug. And so honestly, the big thing that I've kind of realized during my time in cancer research is it's not a question of if cancers can be treated, it's a question of when. Because over a 15-year period working on a cure for one specific variant of cancer, so many people are going to lose their lives to that cancer. And so this cancer, like, and that's the question. It's just always a ticking clock. And there has to be a lot of money and time put into cancer research in order to find cures to save the lives of many people.
Yeah, so given that it is such a long and difficult process, if you could change one thing about pediatric cancer care or research, what would you change?
I would change the fact, I would just, maybe this is a crazy answer. I would say that money and ways that we fund cancer should just not exist. We should just have unlimited money to fund childhood cancer research, because however much biomedical research and especially biotech kind of leans towards making a difference and saving lives, you have to understand that, like, even just the pieces of equipment that you work to do like the work I was doing, like with protein purifications, cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so, especially for childhood cancers and especially rare childhood cancers like AMKL leukemia, which is what my brother had, it takes the payout, if a drug were to be invented, would be relatively minimal, right? Because these rare cancers equally kill people and like ruin the lives of families like my own. But that doesn't mean that they're economically viable, because you throw the same amount of money into a drug that maybe saves the lives of a couple hundred people versus you throw money into the drug that saves the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. The money is naturally going to go to the drug, to the cancers, to trying to help cure cancers that save hundreds of thousands of people's lives. And the tricky thing about pediatric oncology is that many of these cancers are rarer and not very common. And so very, very little research, especially just very little money, goes into pediatric cancer research. And so if there was a magic way to print money and send this into pediatric cancer research, I think we would see a lot more progress. But unfortunately, even though there's obviously nonprofit donations and all sorts of different grants to help generate funds to do research and develop drugs, unfortunately, more money is going to go into the cancers that could produce drugs that essentially cure more people or that more people would pay for. And so it's a challenge in childhood cancer research to find a way to get this money to invest it into developing drugs that will that will, I would say, one life is worth infinite money, right? But when you're trading off like hundreds of lives versus hundreds of thousands of lives, which is unfortunately the trade-off that you make with cancer research, more of the money is going to go into the more common adult cancers, which leaves people with rare on pediatric cancers without answers and without cures.
Yeah, and so what advice and encouragement would you share with other families that are going through the same process that you had to go through?
It's it's really tough. I mean, to see your my I saw my little brother go through cancer treatment and eventually lose his life to a rare form of cancer. And it's not like you can make any promises that like the research that's going on in the labs is going to cure their cancer by the time that they're like, most people aren't going to be able to stay alive long enough to see the the research actually come to fruition, even if they have a cancer that's actively being researched and drugs are being developed for. So I mean, just my advice would be spend time with your family member. Enjoy every minute of your life that you could spend with that family member. Obviously, fight tooth and nail for a cure, but and know that there's research happening and the scientists are working really hard to try to develop cures. But especially in pediatric oncology, it's just one of those things where there's not going to be answers all the time. And like I said, it's really difficult because there's just not a lot of resources going into pediatric cancer research. And so if you have a family member, especially if you know a kid going through some form of cancer, just spend as much time with them as you can, help them out, sit by their bedside, talk to them, take them somewhere fun if they can, if they're not immunosuppressed. And honestly, it's a really tough situation to be in. So just support the family in whatever way's best. Some families want you to be there all the time to talk to them. Some people want to be left alone and maybe you send meals. Just be there and cherish every moment of your life, especially even if you don't know someone who's going through cancer, because obviously it can happen on the drop of a dime. My brother was 2 years old, who said that like he was going to get cancer, right? That we had no warning. And then over like the course of the next 2 years, eventually he fights and then loses his life to cancer. And so just like love and like enjoy every minute of your life with all your loved ones. And if you know someone going through cancer, kid or adult, just support them and their family in whatever way they need. And that's about all you can do. And you can hope that research comes, and funding research is really important, because even if it doesn't end up impacting the life of your loved one, I can guarantee it will impact the lives of loved ones of the future generations.
Okay, and then for our final question, what do you think is next for you?
On a personal level, I've been talking to the people at Nurix, and I definitely think I will come back. I would love to come back next summer and do more work to help progress the field of pediatric cancer research. It's definitely something I'm very passionate about, and I think I really want to make a difference for kids like my brother. Obviously, as a rising junior, the next step for me is just taking more classes, because if it is something I want to go into as a career, I probably have at least a decade more of classes to take before I get there. So my plan is to just keep working hard on my studies, because it's really a field I want to go into, and I'll obviously keep raising money for cancer research organizations like cc-TDI, and giving my time to other organizations such as Nurix, with the hope that even if I can just contribute 1/1000th to one drug that saves the lives of one kid with cancer, that would be a life well spent.
Great, that's the end. Thanks for coming on to the show, and hopefully everyone enjoyed the episode. We'll see you next time.